Hello students, welcome to the next session of the anatomy series. And today the topic of the discussion will be about the thyroid gland. So in the previous video also I have discussed about the detailed description of the thyroid gland. So today in this video I'll be mainly focusing upon the physiology of the thyroid hormones and the negative feedback mechanism. So the negative feedback mechanism is the topic where I'll be laying more emphasis and focusing upon the negative feedback mechanism of the thyroid hormone. So how it is basically conducted. So just before beginning with the topic, I would like to discuss that initially I'll be just having a short review as to what is the anatomy of the thyroid gland. So in the previous videos already I have told you that the thyroid gland is having basically it is lying in the anterior region of the neck, somewhat in the anterior region, and this thyroid gland is going to lie just anterior to the thyroid cartilage. So the thyroid gland is going to lie just anterior to the thyroid cartilage, and it is basically consisting of two lobes, that is the right and the left lobe, and it is the right and the left lobes are going to are joined by an isthmus. So the right and the left lobes are connected by means of an isthmus. So it is basically in an adult, the thyroid gland weighs about 15 to 20 grams in weight. And so this is the brief anatomy of the thyroid gland. Moving the main topic where what I am emphasizing today video is about the physiology of the thyroid hormone. And so in this video, I'll be mainly focusing upon the physiology of the thyroid hormone. And in this, the physiology of the thyroid hormone, it's basically as to what are the hormones, what are being released by the thyroid gland, what are their names, and in what form they are transported into the human body. So looking at the physiology of the thyroid gland, so basically the thyroid gland is secreting basically two hormones. That is the first hormone, it is the thyroxine, that is the T4, and the second, the most important hormone, which is the triiodothyronine, which is the T3. So the triiodothyronine and the thyroxine are the main hormones what are being released by the thyroid gland. So the thyroxine is basically the T4 and the triiodothyronine, it is the T3. So students out there, do remember that the thyroxine is the tetraiodothyronine. It is the triiodothyronine is going to combine with another molecule of the iodine, and that leads to the formation of the tetraiodothyronine, that is the T4 or the thyroxine. But the main emphasis, what is there, I'm going to lay the main emphasis, the most important fact is that the active form of the hormone is T3. So the thyroid, in spite of being in spite of if it is a large amount of thyroxine secretion, in spite of being the quantity, whatever be the quantity of the thyroxine circulating in the human blood plasma, the thyroid hormone is only going to get activated, or it gets converted into the active form. The active form is only the T3. So for exerting the metabolic actions, whatever the metabolic actions the thyroid gland is going to elicit, that can only be manifested only when the T4 is getting converted to the T3. So T3, it is the active form. So just remember that the smaller, that is the T3, that is the triiodothyronine, it is basically the active form of the hormone, and the T4 needs to get converted to the T3 in the peripheral tissues so that it can exert its metabolic action. So students out there, one thing, so the thyroid gland is going to secrete the two hormones, that is the T3 and the T4. The active form of the hormone is T3. So most of the T4 is converted into T3, particularly in the peripheral tissues such as the liver, muscles, and kidneys, the T4 is going to get converted into the T3 to elicit its metabolic action. So particularly the thyroid hormones, that is the T3 and T4, what are being released from the thyroid gland, they are firstly released into the blood plasma, and they are circulating into the blood plasma in the bound form. Students, do remember that the thyroid hormones, they are circulating in the blood plasma. Most of the 97% of the thyroid hormones, they are circulating in the blood plasma in the bound form. So in the plasma, the thyroid hormones are being circulated in the bound form, and this bound form, it is the thyroid binding globulin. It is a plasma protein. It is the plasma protein which is going to bind to the thyroid hormone, and with the help of this thyroid binding globulin, the thyroid hormones is being circulated into the human body. So the most of the hormone is carried in the form of the by the help of the thyroid binding globulin. It is transported into the entire circulation, and only a small amount, only a very minor or a small amount is remains unbound. That is, only a very small amount of the hormone is going to lie freely in the plasma. That is, being only a small amount of the hormone is circulated freely in the blood plasma. So the maximum portion of the thyroid hormones are being carried by the plasma protein, that is the thyroid binding globulin, and only a small fraction of the hormone is going to lie in the free or the unbound form. So this was a brief discussion about the physiology of the thyroid gland. Moving on to the next very important thing, that is the regulation of the thyroid hormone secretion. So students out there, this is the thyroid gland, what the schematic diagram I have drawn. And in this diagram, I have made it much simpler as to how we can very easily remember about the secretion of the thyroid hormones, which are under the strict control of the pituitary gland and the hypothalamus glands. So students out there, one thing more I would like to tell you very importantly, that the pituitary gland, which is called as the master gland, that is the master gland, it is consisting of basically two lobes, that is the anterior lobe and the posterior lobe. So the pituitary gland consists of two lobes, anterior pituitary and the posterior pituitary. And this pituitary, it is called the master gland, which lies in the sella turcica of the sphenoid bone of the skull. So the secretion, the pituitary gland is going to have two lobes, that is the anterior pituitary, which is known as the adenohypophysis, and the posterior pituitary, which is known as the neurohypophysis. So the anterior pituitary is basically secreting whatever the hormones. The very important fact, the students, what they need to remember is that the pituitary gland always secretes the stimulating hormones. So whatever the endocrine hormones are being released into the blood plasma, they are under the strict control of the pituitary gland, and the pituitary gland always releases that particular stimulating hormone to stimulate the gland. So in case of the thyroid gland, the pituitary gland is going to secrete the thyroid stimulating hormone, that is the TSH. The thyroid stimulating hormone is being released by the pituitary gland, and the thyroid stimulating hormone is also known by another name, that is thyrotropin. So students out there, do remember that the pituitary gland is under the secretion from the pituitary gland, the secretion of the thyroid gland, that is the thyroxine and T3, is under the strict control of the pituitary gland, which is the master gland. So thyroid hormones, that is T3 and T4, thyroxine, they are released under the stimulation what is sent by the pituitary gland. So the pituitary being the master gland, from the anterior pituitary, the thyroid stimulating hormone or the thyrotropin is being released, and that goes and acts on the thyroid gland to release the thyroxine. So moving on, and still I have called the pituitary as the master gland, but this pituitary gland is also under the strict control of another very important gland, which is known as the master of the master gland. Pituitary, it is the master gland, but the hypothalamus, it is also known as the master of the master gland. So what it is going to do is, the hypothalamus is strictly controlling the secretion of the TSH, that is the thyroid stimulating hormone or the thyrotropin, by releasing a very important hormone, that is the thyrotropin releasing hormones. So students out there, make this point very clear in your mind, that the hypothalamus, it is the master of the master gland. So pituitary, it is the master gland. Hypothalamus, it is the master of the master gland. So what it is going to do is, hypothalamus, whatever the hormones are being released by the hypothalamus, they are the releasing hormones. Clear? In the upcoming sessions, I'll be uploading videos on hypothalamus also. So this hypothalamus, it is the center for the release of the various, the suffix, the ending of the release secretions of the hypothalamus, it is having the releasing hormones. So the hypothalamus is always releasing, it is going to secrete the releasing hormones, that is the RH, releasing hormones. And under the strict control of the releasing hormones, the pituitary is going to secrete the stimulating hormones. So in case of the thyroid gland, the hypothalamus is going to secrete the thyrotropin releasing hormone, which is going to stimulate the anterior pituitary to secrete the thyroid stimulating hormone. And this thyroid stimulating hormone in turn is going to act on the thyroid gland to secrete the thyroxine and the T3, that is the triiodothyronine, and the thyroxine, that is T4. So this is the entire axis. Now, already I have told you that the thyroid hormone secretion is under the regulatory control of the TSH and the TRH. All right. So this phenomena of maintenance of a constant level of the thyroid hormones in the body, it proceeds by the negative feedback mechanism. Negative feedback mechanism of the thyroid hormones on the pituitary gland. So what is happening actually is, whenever the levels of T3 and T4 are raised in the blood plasma, so that is going to act as a signal to the pituitary gland, and the level of the TSH is going to decrease. Since the levels of the T3 and T4 are increased in the blood plasma, so what it is going to elicit is, it is going to send a negative feedback to the pituitary gland, so that the thyroid stimulating hormones level falls, and ultimately this will in turn send signal to the hypothalamus, so that the thyroid releasing hormone is going to fall. So the same is true for the vice versa. So whenever the levels of T3 and T4 are going to get lowered down, that is going to again lead to a negative feedback mechanism, and the anterior pituitary is going to secrete more of the TSH. So the TSH is going to be released more, and next, if the TSH is low, again from the hypothalamus, it is going to send the negative feedback mechanism, so that the thyroid releasing hormone is being released more by the hypothalamus, which is going to incite or signal the anterior pituitary to release more of the TSH to maintain the constant level of T3 and T4. So this was the entire mechanism by which the negative feedback mechanism of the secretion of the thyroid hormones is being maintained. So the thyroid hormone secretion is proceeding under the negative feedback mechanism. So students, in this way I have summarized about the physiology of the thyroid gland, the regulation of the thyroid hormone secretion, and a brief gist of the anatomy of the thyroid gland. So students, if you have any queries or doubts about the topic, you can just comment me in the comment, and do like and share my video. And students, if you do like my video, don't forget to subscribe my channel and do press the bell icon so that you can be further updated about my newer videos. Thank you for watching.